Hi, my name is John Schmaltzbauer. I teach in the Department of Religious Studies at Missouri State. My research is on American Protestantism, and in fact I was hired to fill the Blanche Gorman Strong Chair in Protestant Studies. One of the great things about being at this university is that we are in a region that is endlessly fascinating in terms of its religious life. And for somebody who studies Protestantism, the Ozarks is almost an ideal location. Today I want to share with you some of the tidbits from my courses that I teach on religion in the Ozarks and religion in America. And it's more sort of a sampler of what you might get in those kinds of courses. When we think about religion in the Ozarks, one of the important things to do is to figure out what we're talking about. And a lot of students don't know where the Ozarks are or where the Ozarks is, even though they have lived in the Ozarks all their life. A distinguished scholar of the Ozarks visiting the campus said that he didn't know that he grew up in the Ozarks until he read about it in a book. So that's one of the things we have to think about. One of the great people to work at Missouri State was the historian Robert Flanders, who started the Center for Ozark Studies and Ozarks Watch magazine. And in the first or second issue, he wrote this: "Where is the Ozarks? What is the Ozarks? Is the Ozarks is, or are the Ozarks are? Is the Ozarks like Appalachia? And what is a native? Newcomers find answers to be at best indirect, often evasive or negative. Especially in years past, one might hear, 'We're just in the foothills here, but on down there, that's real hillbilly country.' This town isn't Ozarks anymore. It's gone beyond that. This food is too fancy to be real Ozarks food," and so on. Flanders writes, "I asked one native, a young professional woman, 'Is Springfield in the Ozarks?' 'Oh no,' was the reply. 'Springfield was never in the Ozarks.'" Well, she was wrong. Although I think her answer suggests that the Ozarks is in the eye of the beholder. There's a subjective element to defining where the Ozarks are, although geographers would say that there really is a definable region that we can call the Ozarks. The MSU geography faculty were pioneers in mapping the Ozarks, people like Russell Gerlach and Milton Rafferty. And Milton Rafferty's map of the Ozarks, which you can see, shows the boundaries of this region, extending from the Boston Mountains on the south end in Arkansas, across the state line, including the Springfield Plains. So the woman was wrong. Most geographers put Springfield square in the Ozarks, and indeed the nickname of Springfield for tourist marketing purposes has been the Queen City of the Ozarks, and then extending all the way to the north to, according to Milton Rafferty, the Missouri River border. Now, I have to add that people who live around Jefferson City, Herman, Washington, Missouri, would deny that they have ever lived in the Ozarks. But geographers use the landscape to map a region rather than just cultural features. Probably the cultural Ozarks is a little bit south of that Missouri River border, but not much. Russell Gerlach has also helped us understand the Ozarks. Gerlach was a colleague of Rafferty's in the geography department, and one of the things he did is to try to figure out where Ozarkers came from originally. And the next map that you see here is the map Russell Gerlach put together of the origins of Ozark settlers, and you can see lots of letters on the map. TN means that people in that area came from Tennessee. KY means people came from Kentucky. The smaller letters are the European ethnic groups that people came from, a big G for German, and so on and so forth. What I want you to look at is the American origins of these people. What states are on here? And you can see in the southern part of Missouri, in the Ozarks region, there are an awful lot of TN and KYs, which suggests that the Ozarks population originated in large part from Appalachia. This is not the case necessarily now, but the early Ozark settlers, the Scotch-Irish who emigrated to the United States, moved into the Pennsylvania and Virginia backcountry, and moved down into Kentucky and Tennessee through the Cumberland Gap. The next map you see is also from Russell Gerlach and shows the map of migration routes that people took. And you can see some followed the Cumberland River, some followed the Ohio River, but that westward movement from the mountain area of Appalachia to the Ozarks suggests that in some ways the Ozarks are kind of an extension of Appalachian culture, although at the same time different, and we'll get into that in a second. Michael Ellis in our English department at Missouri State has written an entry for the Encyclopedia of Appalachia, which you can see here, on Appalachian English and Ozark English. And he writes that although precise origins are difficult to determine, 19th century census records indicate that natives of Tennessee and Kentucky were especially numerous among early residents of the Ozarks. That's what we just saw on the map, right? And recent linguistic analyses, he writes, have indeed confirmed that Ozark English and Appalachian English are very closely related varieties. Now, what about religion? If language is similar, if Ozark English and Appalachian English are similar, what about religion? Is Ozark religion a carbon copy of Appalachian religion? One historian of the Ozarks suggested as much to me when he said, if you want to understand religion in the Ozarks, save yourself a lot of time and read a stack of books on Appalachian religion. And there are many similarities, which we'll see. Some of the same evangelical denominations that were prevalent in Appalachia became prevalent in the Ozarks. There are also a lot of differences. There's no coal mining in the Ozarks for the most part. It's very different in terms of politics. There's not a big kind of mining movement and things like that. Well, I want to show you some maps now that kind of give you a sense of where the Ozarks fits in with the regional distribution of American religious groups. The first map is entitled Leading Church Bodies from 2000, and is based on self-reported membership data from denominations and congregations. And this is from a great web page at Valparaiso University. And you can see that the Ozarks is part of the Sea of Red on the map, which could really be another name for the Bible Belt. The Sea of Red indicates counties where Baptists are the largest religious group. And you can see that most of Missouri is red, except for a blue Catholic area around St. Louis and along the Missouri River, and a little bit of blue around Kansas City. Otherwise, almost all of Missouri and Arkansas are red, suggesting that this kind of Baptist region extends up into the Ozarks. Now, does that make the Ozarks unique? Not at all. In fact, it makes them quite similar to other parts of the South, both the upland South, the mountainous South of Appalachia, and the lowland South that's along the coasts. The next map shows Baptists as a percentage of all residents, and this kind of gives us a little bit more clarity, because it actually shows that there aren't any counties in Missouri or in the Ozarks where more than 50% of people are Baptists. That's not like some other parts of the country, where, as a historian friend of mine once joked, someone told her there are more Baptists than people. In the Ozarks, you can see there are many counties that have from 25 to 50% of all residents Baptists, and others 10 to 25%, which is still a lot. Throw a snowball into a crowd 4 times and you're liable to hit a Baptist in most Ozarks counties. Not that I recommend that, but the odds are. So there are a lot of Baptists in the Ozarks, although you can see on the map there are a couple counties where there are less than 10%, which is interesting. Now look at the next map. This is Catholics as a percentage of all residents, and you can see that Catholics are really underrepresented in the Ozarks. Most Ozarks counties have less than 10% of residents who identify in Catholic groups. Compare that to the St. Louis area, where 25 to 50% of the population identifies as Catholic, or at least one county along the Missouri River, maybe that's around Hermann, Missouri, which is a German enclave, more than 50% Catholic. The next map shows Pentecostals as a percentage of all residents. That's interesting because Springfield, of course, is the hometown of the most important American Pentecostal denomination, at least for whites, the Assemblies of God. You can see from this map that it's not really clear that there's a huge percentage of Pentecostals in the Ozarks, although it seems to be higher than some regions. Compare the southern part of Missouri, where you see the darker shaded reds and pinks, to, say, New England or Wisconsin or Minnesota, and you can see that there are more Pentecostals here than those places. And one county, I think it probably is Greene County, has from 6 to 20.6% Pentecostal. But still, 6% is not a great deal. And you can see there are many other parts of the country, like Oklahoma, the Pacific Northwest, certain counties, although probably not Seattle, that have a higher percentage of Pentecostals. So Pentecostalism is a national kind of phenomenon. It's not restricted to one region. In fact, it's becoming a global phenomenon. The next map shows Restoration Movement Christians as a percentage of all residents. Some people may have wondered who Pentecostals are, and Pentecostals tend to be people who are in denominations that emphasize speaking in tongues and other supernatural gifts like healing that are attributed to the Holy Spirit. Restoration Movement Christians are part of three movements generally, actually. The Churches of Christ, who are the most conservative, the Disciples of Christ, who are the most liberal or moderate, and then in between, the independent Christian churches. They all come out of a frontier movement that wanted to restore early New Testament Christianity, or their vision of early New Testament Christianity, and that's why they're called the Restoration Movement. Another name for this trend in American Protestantism was primitivism. And you can see that this makes sense on the map as a frontier movement because look at the eastern seaboard. You don't see any counties that are really darkened that have a presence of these groups. They did not go from west to east. They went from east to west. They began in places like Kentucky, at Cane Ridge, where there was a huge frontier revival. And they developed followings in Tennessee. And then they moved westward. And you can see the Ozarks don't have the greatest concentration of these Disciples of Christ, Churches of Christ, and independent Christian churches, but they do have a lot of them. And some counties are darker than others. So that's another group that you can see is not unique to the Ozarks, but definitely present. Now let's get a little closer to the ground. We're going to look at some county data here. And this is also national data that has been crunched, but also you can find county-level expressions of these databases. Greene County is the first county that we're looking at, and you can see that Southern Baptists, not surprisingly, are the 800-pound gorilla of Greene County religion, with many more congregations than anybody else. But you can see there are also some other large groups. Catholics are surprisingly large in Greene County. They're in the top 5. Assemblies of God has over 40 congregations in the area. Now, even though the world headquarters of the Assemblies of God, or at least the national headquarters, are in Greene County and Springfield, Assemblies of God are not the largest group. Southern Baptists are the largest group. And there's a mainline moderate to liberal Protestant denomination, the United Methodists, which are in the top 5 in Greene County as well. You also see some smaller groups in Greene County, an estimated few hundred Jewish residents. There is one synagogue in Springfield, Temple Israel, which is actually over 100 years old. There's a Baha'i community in Springfield. Even back in 1890, right before the synagogue was founded, there was a spiritualist church in Springfield, which seems to have disappeared, but this is a church that emphasized seances and contact with the dead. So religious pluralism, religious diversity is not necessarily new to Greene County. And even though there is this diversity, the overwhelming largest dominant group are these evangelical Protestant denominations, Southern Baptists and Assemblies of God. If you're wondering what an evangelical Protestant is, we're going to define that in a little bit. Let's move west. Let's take I-44 out to Lawrence County, where you see towns like Freistatt, Missouri, which was founded by Germans who moved around a little bit. Some of them ended up in Minnesota, and then they came down to Lawrence County and founded a Lutheran settlement of Missouri Synod Lutherans. In Lawrence County is one of the few counties in the Ozarks where Catholics and Lutherans are in the top 5 in rural areas. This is an area where there is both evangelical religion, a lot of Baptists, and they're bigger than the Lutherans, but you also have Lutheran congregations like Trinity Lutheran Church in Freistatt, where they have all kinds of things going on, sponsored by the Lions Club, a German festival. And in the 1950s, Trinity Lutheran Church in Freistatt was named one of the great churches of America. Now let's hop on the highways that take us to the east, the eastern part of the Ozarks. Fairly remote area, Shannon County, whose county seat is Eminence. And in Shannon County, you can see it's almost all evangelical groups, a small Catholic parish. And indeed, Catholics have been in Eminence off and on for about 100 years, but never a very large group. But lots of Pentecostals, lots of Churches of Christ, Southern Baptists, and other groups. And so you can see this is a county where there is not a lot of religious diversity. No presence of groups like Baha'i or a Jewish synagogue or something like that, but overwhelmingly evangelical Protestant. Well, I've mentioned that word evangelical a lot, so it's probably appropriate to define it. And the definition I like to use, and there are a lot of ways of defining evangelicalism, comes from the British scholar David Bebbington, a British scholar who has called attention to the fact that evangelical religion is a transatlantic phenomenon. You can find it in England historically, people like John and Charles Wesley and George Whitefield, the great revivalist, and you can find it, of course, in America, where it really has become almost like a national folk religion, in the words of the historian Randall Ballmer. Well, how does David Bebbington define evangelicalism? He has 4 traits that he likes to associate with it. The first one is conversionism. And you think about conversionism, the root word there, of course, is conversion. And most people have some vague idea of what a born-again Christian is. And that kind of transformative conversion experience is at the core of evangelical experience in the United States. A lot of people didn't know what born again meant as a term until the 1970s. People knew in the South, Southern Baptists knew, but when Jimmy Carter ran for president in 1976, when people said he was a born again Christian, people in New York City and on the West Coast sort of scratched their heads. But that born-again conversionist experience is one of the 4 ways that Bebbington defines evangelicalism. A second quality is activism. Obviously, evangelicals are not the only group that are activistic, but one of the things about evangelicalism that Bebbington and also the historian Mark Knoll point out is that evangelicals are a people that almost live by the motto, and here I'm quoting the White Rabbit from Alice in Wonderland, don't just stand there, do something. Except I think the White Rabbit says, just don't do something, stand there. So actually evangelicals are not like the White Rabbit. They are more doers than contemplators, according to Bebbington and Knoll. They're activistic. They want to get involved, whether that's in American politics on issues like abortion, or whether it's in trying to spread the word. A third trait of evangelicalism that Bebbington talks about is biblicism. The B-I-B-L-E, that's the book for me, as the old Sunday school song goes that evangelicals sing. The core of religious authority is not in a church structure, as it is in Roman Catholicism or Eastern Orthodox Christianity, or even in some movements like Lutheranism, which also reveres the Bible. In fact, all those movements and religious traditions have a high place for the Bible. But for evangelicalism, biblical authority is sort of the pinnacle of religious authority. And often evangelicals take a literal view of the Bible, meaning that they really take it word for word. The Bible says what it means and means what it says, or at least they think that the Bible is without error and the highest authority in their lives. So that's a third trait of evangelicalism. And that would make sense here in the Bible Belt. Springfield has been called the buckle of the Bible Belt by some people. Fourth trait, crucicentrism, which is probably an unfamiliar word until you think about the root of that, which is cruca, the same kind of root word of crucifixion. Evangelicalism sees the hinge of history being the death on the cross of Jesus as a sacrifice for the sins of the world. Now, they're not alone in that. Roman Catholicism has a deeply crucicentric theology, but put together with conversionism and some of these other ingredients, you get something distinctive to evangelicalism. One of the ways to kind of think about evangelicalism is in terms of its music, and that is found in the Ozarks in several folk song collections. At Missouri State, we have a fantastic folk song collection that was put together by a man named Max Hunter, who never taught here. He was a traveling salesman. He sold appliances, and he plied the people that he sold appliances to with anything he could, including some adult beverages, to get them to sing folk songs, and he would record them. And thank goodness, well over 1,000 of these songs have been digitized and can be found on the webpage of Missouri State University. There's a smaller song collection down at Lyon College in Arkansas that was put together by John Quincy Wolfe. And the song that you see here, that you can see on your screen, is I Am Bound for the Promised Land, which is an old, what Vance Randolph, the folk song and folklore collector, called a jump up song. A song that was sung at revivals when people got saved. And it goes, I am bound for the promised land. I am bound for the promised land. Oh, who will come and go with me? I am bound for the promised land. And of course, promised land is a rich metaphor. It can mean heaven, as it would at a revival service when somebody's getting saved and going down the aisle to have that born-again conversion experience. But it can also mean a place, and indeed many people have imagined America as the promised land. That's certainly found in the African American experience. This is a song that's been sung throughout the Ozarks for a long, long time. And it's a song that originated not in the Ozarks, but remember we talked about where Ozarkers came from, the first wave coming from Kentucky and Tennessee, of Europeans anyway, and they sang this song. And indeed, people like the anthropologist Dixon Bruce have written about the songs of revivalism that were sung at the camp meetings on the frontier in Kentucky and Tennessee. And often they use this promised land imagery or crossing over the Jordan or Canaan imagery, which is another name in the Bible for the promised land. And Dixon Bruce writes in his book, And They All Sang Hallelujah, the following about Canaan. He says, Canaan language has long been associated with movements made up of people who view existing conditions as intolerable and hope for something different to be effected by divine intervention. The frontier saints were themselves looking for something different. These were songs sung by people who were not necessarily happy with where they were geographically and maybe spiritually. People on the move, which is kind of the quintessential American experience. The frontier experience. And so when they were singing about Canaan, they were singing about heaven, but they were also sometimes singing about where they were headed. I'm going to take you briefly outside the Ozarks to kind of the Delta area of Arkansas, which is not that far away. In about 5-6 hours drive from Springfield, you can get there, to Dyess, Arkansas, which is where Johnny Cash grew up. And in his autobiography, which has a fitting title, Cash, the Autobiography, he says that the first song he remembers singing was I Am Bound for the Promised Land. And he says he was in the back of a flatbed truck on the road to Dyess, Arkansas, from the first house I remember living in near Kingsland, Arkansas. So for Johnny Cash and his family, I Am Bound for the Promised Land was not just a song about heaven and a kind of a conversion song, but it was a song of hope about moving to a new place. They moved to this town called Dyess that the federal government had set up, and they gave everybody a house and some land. And as Johnny Cash put it, I grew up under socialism in this promised land, which you can visit. It's only about 5-6 hours from Springfield. This song, I Am Bound for the Promised Land, was on the Johnny Cash album, My Mother's Hymn Book, which we'll talk about in a second. His mother's hymn book was a songbook called Heavenly Highway Hymns, which is one of the songbooks spread by gospel quartets and gospel publishing companies.
But before we talk about that, you can listen to the song. It's available in a clip on Amazon. You can also see a picture here of the homestead of Johnny Cash in Dyess, Arkansas, which I took. When we stopped in the Dyess kind of post office town hall, I think it was the town hall, they said, just don't stop in front of the house, because they're kind of annoyed by people stopping in front of the house. So we took this picture at about 25 miles per hour. Now, I have read about people who wanted to really get into the Johnny Cash experience and scooped up what they thought were cotton plants and put them in their car trunks. Of course, the natives knew that it was really soybeans. Well, this hymn book, Heavenly Highway Hymns, that Johnny Cash cut a whole album called My Mother's Hymn Book, was also a songbook that made its way to the Ozarks. And one of the first families of music in the Ozarks are the Ballou family, which is not spelled B-L-U-E, but is spelled B-I-L-Y-E-U. And many of you might have heard of the band Big Smith, but there also is the Hosey Blue family. Hosey Blue Jr. is the pastor of a big Southern Baptist church in Springfield called Ridgecrest Baptist Church, which is on Republic Road on the south edge of Springfield, although he grew up in rural Greene County. And the liner notes for their album, which actually is named after the songbook, Heavenly Highway Hymn, says this about this songbook. It says, the extended Ballou family has sung from many hymn books, but Heavenly Highway Hymns holds a special place. This was the book that you always sought out at Grandma Thelma's house when it came time to sing. And again, I think this shows that religious music, religious beliefs in the Ozarks are kind of not unique to the Ozarks, but can be found in other areas. This hymn book was also in the Arkansas Delta. If you look at what they sang on Heavenly Highway Hymns, you can say that they also were looking to a promised land. The Blue family sang songs like I Feel Like Traveling On, which you can hear on the webpage of Mayapple Records. Songs like All Live in Glory, which sort of have a hope of a future. How Beautiful Heaven Must Be. Heaven's Jubilee. Where the Soul Never Dies. All these songs are about moving to a Canaan or a promised land or another place. And they kind of reflect that kind of Appalachian frontier religious tradition which came to the Ozarks. You can also see that on the Big Smith album Live at Lone Star, which has several clips that are on the internet and you can listen to. One that I recommend is I Am a Pilgrim, which is also about a journey to heaven, to the promised land. Pilgrimage is always about journey. Another song written by an Ozarker, Albert E. Brumley, is All Fly Away. And that's a song that has traveled as much as the imagery of the title would suggest. That song has flown away from the Ozarks and is sung in inner city neighborhoods by African Americans. It's sung by Southern whites. It's sung all over the world. In fact, there's a conference on Southern gospel music coming up where that song actually is the topic of a paper, and it talks about the song going into the hood and out of the rural Ozarks, which is where it originated. Well, that Lone Star album was recorded in a church in Taney County, Missouri that was a Church of God. And you can see the interior of Lone Star Church is very plain from the picture on your screen. It has a kind of simple wood construction, very beautiful, but in a sparse kind of way. And I think that is representative of the extremely Protestant character of religion in the Ozarks, of this evangelicalism that shies away from ornate kind of Gothic cathedrals. And in fact, it's hard from the picture to see any images or pictures at all. There might be somewhere in the Sunday school a picture in an Ozarks church of Jesus, but sanctuaries often tend to be plain and simple. And I think that reflects a kind of Protestant anxiety about, not wanting to stray into idolatry. And so this kind of iconoclastic tradition. this is not unique to the Ozarks. The Bethesda Baptist Church in Greene County, Georgia, which was featured in photographs taken by the Farm Security Administration in the 1930s, and which the Library of Congress has made available to all Americans on its webpage, shows a sanctuary that does not have much. It has a Bible on a pulpit, and it has pews. And that's really all you need in some places to have a Baptist church. And I think what this shows is the centrality of the spoken and preached word and the written word of God to Baptists. It's a very different sensibility than you'll find in a Catholic or even a Lutheran church, as we're going to see. Samuel S. Hill, the distinguished Florida-based historian of Southern religion, has written about Protestant church architecture in the South. And I think he has a lot that speaks to both what the Lone Star Church looks like in Taney County, Missouri, and churches like this Georgia Baptist Church. He writes, "Speaking and hearing, then, are the senses brought alive by Southern religion. A glance inside the auditorium, a term far more apt than sanctuary, when listening is primary and conduct is informal, is revealing." So the auditorium, because of the auditory sense, right? Everything centers, he writes, on the stand where the Holy Bible rests and from behind which the preacher declares its message. Now the funny thing is that Sam Hill, I don't think, has seen the picture of the Bethesda Baptist Church in Greene County, Georgia. There is no picture of the church from Greene County in the New Encyclopedia of Southern Religion where he writes these words. But this idea of the Bible as primary and churches where a Bible sits on a pulpit is so ubiquitous, it's so common throughout the South as well as in the Ozarks that it's as if he was describing the church in the picture. This auditorium tradition, in the words of Gene Kilday, the historian, church as theater, has really continued as a tradition in the Ozarks. As you can see from the interior of James River Assembly, the second largest church in the Pentecostal denomination, the Assemblies of God, which actually doesn't describe itself as a denomination, but as a movement. That terminology notwithstanding, you can see theater seats in this enormous room. And it does not look like a cathedral, it looks like a theater. It looks like a place that is an auditory space where singing, preaching, speaking, proclaiming the word, and praying are the key activities, not really choreographed movement using the rituals and symbols of, say, a high church tradition. Now, this kind of auditorium, word-centered religion is not the only kind of religion in the Ozarks. We talked earlier about how Catholics are a minority in the Ozarks. And indeed, in the Diocese of Springfield, Cape Girardeau, there are only a few 10,000 Catholics, maybe 60,000, compared to hundreds of thousands of Catholics in St. Louis and its surrounding area. And yet there are some rich traditions. We already talked about the German areas of the Ozarks that are in the kind of rural parts of this region, Lawrence County, up on the Missouri River, places like Herman that would not admit to being in the Ozarks, but fall within the geographical Ozarks. But right here in Springfield, not far from Missouri State University, is St. Joseph's Catholic Church, which is in a German neighborhood historically. It's a few blocks from St. John's United Church of Christ, which was a German Protestant church. And if you go into St. Joseph's Catholic Church, which is one of the most beautiful church structures in Springfield, you'll see graceful arched ceilings, a huge altar, which points out that the preached word is not the center of attention here. What is at the center of attention is the celebration of communion, or what Catholics call the Eucharist, or the Mass. And so this ritual action of transforming bread and wine into the body and blood of Jesus is really at the heart of this kind of Ozarks religion, which is just as Ozarkian as the Baptist religion or the Pentecostal religion that we were talking about just a few minutes ago. Indeed, you can see some of the history of Springfield in the stained glass windows of St. Joseph's Catholic Church. The Herr family which ran the famous department store. The Lohmeyers, who ran a mortuary. And both of these names are still found on buildings in Springfield. The Hers building being restored right now, attended St. Joseph's Church, and their names are in the stained glass windows because they were some of the wealthier families there, and that's often a way to memorialize a gift. So a very different kind of Ozarks. If we go north of Springfield to the town of Cole Camp, Missouri, which was settled overwhelmingly by Protestant German immigrants, we can see St. Paul's Evangelical Lutheran Church. Evangelical in Germany did not mean the same thing as evangelicalism means in the American South. It is not a Bible Belt, born-again kind of religion, but more a religion of the 16th century Reformation, which is a lot closer to Catholicism, even though there are very strong differences. Martin Luther did not want to start a new church, although he ended up starting a new church. But there are many things about Lutheranism that are closer to Catholicism than a Southern Baptist way of doing religion would be. You can see the carved altarpiece of the St. the St. Paul's Evangelical Lutheran Church, which was built around 1917. And this altarpiece could really fit in a Catholic church as well as a Lutheran church, although it would look very strange in a Baptist or a Pentecostal setting because there are these key religious differences. You can see these kind of more Catholic forms of Protestantism working themselves out in Episcopal churches in the Ozarks. Christ Episcopal Church is the oldest standing structure of a church in Springfield. And you can see it has kind of a Gothic feel, although Gothic translated into the medium of wood in the oldest part of the building. It's a style that is called Carpenter Gothic. And Lynn Morrow wrote a really wonderful portrait of this congregation for Ozarks Watch magazine and pointed out that the architecture of the church really is from two eras. One where they built the Carpenter Gothic original nave, and then the addition, which was built with stone. And they've recently committed to expanding and have built an addition which looks even more on the kind of Catholic end of the spectrum and is in sharp contrast to the kind of spare, plain, pulpit-centered churches that you see in a lot of rural areas of the Ozarks. As I mentioned, there's been a synagogue in Springfield for over 100 years, founded in the early 1890s. Temple Israel is now part of the Reform wing of Judaism, which is the more liberal of the three major denominations in American Judaism. And you can see from the picture here that this is a very modern, contemporary look to the synagogue. We just can see the exterior here. It is out in farm area near Rogersville, even though it says Temple Israel Springfield. That really refers to the metropolitan area that it's in. And they moved the synagogue out to this area not that long ago. For a long time, it was within Springfield, but it sort of reflects the suburbanization that has overtaken the area. If you want to know more about the Springfield Jewish community, there is a project that has an excellent webpage, the Telling Traditions Project, which has used film and oral history and photography. And you can see clips of people from the congregation talking about the Ozarks Jewish heritage. This has just been a sampler of religion and all its diversity in the Ozarks. If you want to learn more about this, I suggest you take a course on Ozarks religion or religion in America, or consult the issue of Ozarks Watch magazine, which was published in the late 1980s, which is still very valuable, simply called Religion in the Ozarks. There was a later issue of Ozarks Watch that also addressed religion, but it's not available online. But there's so much to be said, and we've only really scratched the surface. But thank you for staying with me on the tour of religion in Ozarks today.